Hello, everyone, and welcome to GCS Connect Leaders Series. I've got Deb Aspinall with me today. She is an interim consultant that we have been working with within our market for the last few years. GCS is a technology recruitment agency, and GCS Connect is our way of building a virtual community for the expert talent and the innovative companies that we work with. And we use the Leaders Series to speak to people like Deb to really give us their impressions on the current market, how talent is working and how that's interacting with technology and the wider kind of workforce. So really excited to have Deb with us today. Hi, Deb.
Hello, nice to be here.
How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
No.
And in case it isn't obvious from my title, I am a consultant in the talent space, so both contingent and perm. So I left Disney last year and I've been at the BBC doing a contract since.
Fantastic, good stuff. So two big brands, and it's obviously
very different companies, but yeah, two brands that I love and admire. So very lucky.
And probably made BBC is non-profit, isn't it? They've probably taken up a lot of our eyes over the years, haven't they, Disney and the BBC, you know?
Well, I'm at BBC Studios, which is the profit-making part, but those profits then get fed back into the public service, so yeah.
Good stuff. Well, it's great to speak to you. And we really want to talk today about, you know, talent, hiring challenges, and really building a strong HR community and network in this remote world. And I thought that the key question I would start with, and I think it's really, really important to talk through it. And we've had a few talent and HR people on this series, but it's really interesting to speak to someone coming into 2021 now. What do you think are the main hiring challenges that COVID has presented in the last year? You've obviously been through it, both in terms of looking for a job, but also in terms of hiring.
I mean, I think the obvious thing to say is that, businesses don't like uncertainty. So I think we've seen a reduction in recruiting activity across most sectors, obviously not all. It's a great time to be in e-commerce. But generally speaking, particularly in TA has been overall talent acquisition has been reduced in most companies. So I think you're seeing fewer opportunities, and as a consequence, you're seeing more applications. I think most recruiters are experiencing this. People have been through redundancies, that lots of companies are restructuring, people are on furlough, but they're still able to secure other work. So we're definitely seeing volume applications. And quite often, people will use this time to think about their career choices and perhaps experiment with different career options. So you're seeing an increase in applications from people from different worlds, from different sectors, doing different things.
And does that mean that the kind of the customer service element, as it were, of talent is put under more pressure? You have to deal with more remote onboarding. You have to develop more
remote onboarding, when businesses have had to adapt. And I think for the most part, I've been quite successful. I mean, it is different. I started working for a new company. You're having to form relationships with people without actually meeting them. You're trying to get up to speed with the company culture without being physically in the space. And, you're immersed into, or rather you're trying to immerse yourself in the brand, and that just becomes more challenging when you're not physically there and you're not physically able to connect with people and have those spontaneous conversations that you would if you were sharing an office space. It tends to be slightly more formal because you're having to meet people through Zoom, and that requires that you send them an invitation. So you have, it. In a sense, it's the same as meeting somebody in a meeting room, but you do lose that spontaneity, I think, and that's just not an onboarding piece. That's just a challenge, I think.
That's right.
I suppose one plus, and I don't, I haven't canvassed other companies, but my guess is that in some ways the processes have become faster for recruiting. I think many companies have really tried to remove some of the bureaucracy in order to unblock the process during COVID. And decisions tend to be faster, and it's of course easier, just from a practical point of view, it's easier getting people on a Zoom than it is trying to align calendars for when people are physically in the office. So
the logistics of it. I mean, we recently published a paper actually around graduate recruitment, where we've done a lot of major graduate volume recruitment, and we recently did one for a software company based in Reading, where in the past this would have maybe taken us, with the logistics, and you've probably done graduate programs, to get them all in the same place while they're doing their degree. It's hard, isn't it? It's not easy to do it. And we were able to fill 20 graduate roles. There's probably more graduates available at the moment, but 20 graduate roles in 3 weeks. And that's unheard of, really. And these are tech graduates as well, not customer service or anything like that. And it was really impressive. And that was really down to that fast process, and the fact that the company was fully happy to run through in a remote way, as opposed to getting everyone in a big room or whatever.
Yeah. And I know we're going to come on to talk about it, but I think young people as well will start to make different career choices. How many young people have been inspired by our NHS and may decide to follow a career path there instead of what they may have imagined a few years ago. So we're going to see all those kinds of changes.
Hopefully a good changes. So I think it's interesting that there has been challenges, but also positive outcomes for it, and you've seen that yourself. And then we talked about onboarding, and I think you obviously work closely with managers in your organizations in order to build those teams. So what guidance would you offer managers who are really struggling to connect with those teams remotely, and how to build that strong team engagement?
I think for managers in particular from smaller companies, I mean, it's challenging for everybody, but if you work for an established brand that has invested in support programs, you've already got the infrastructure in place. But managers working for smaller brands, with smaller teams, smaller headcount, smaller overall headcount, I think have struggled to try and make team collaboration work virtually. And I think, to simplify it, because there's so much you could say, and a lot of it, again, sounds really obvious. It will be obvious to the people who are doing it really well. It will be obvious to the people who are doing it really well. But for those managers that do need that support, I would simplify it into 3 key pieces of advice. And the first is that I would reinforce purpose and mission at every available opportunity, and to the point where you're over communicating it. So people need to know, what's the roadmap of the company, how does my individual contribution affect that, what difference can I make? So it's really about that purpose piece. And then
I guess it's important to have a purpose and mission to start off with, right? So if you can't reinforce it, you better go and work out what it is first.
And I think companies who haven't clearly communicated that are going to be struggling now. So that creates an opportunity to work on it. I mean, and where you are seeing wins, to celebrate those, to remember to recognise when people are making positive contributions despite the challenges and the isolation. So the first is to reinforce purpose and mission wherever possible. Okay, number 2 is to ask, not assume. So we've got variation in personal circumstances, and we know that isolation is a primary factor in mental health. So you really need to connect with your team on not just a team level, team meetings and team events and so on, but on a personal and individual level. Ask questions, don't assume, be empathetic, and keep asking, and try to keep some of those conversations as spontaneous as you can. So, rather than a kind of formal weekly you know, it's nice to have something in the diary, but, you know, just check in with people. I think they really appreciate that. I've been really lucky in both of the companies that I've worked for during, you know, the last year, and they've just really set the standard, you know, very, very high. And, you know, one of the things that I've appreciated as well is the flexibility to have those team meetings and conversations outside of Zoom. So you can do a walk and talk. You know, it doesn't have to be, it's a phone call. You don't have to be chained to your laptop, and actually encouraging your team to do that, to get up and walk around, you know, walk about, take exercise, take breaks wherever possible.
Do you know what, Deb? We had this conversation when we were talking about this conversation, this session, and you said to try and put calls through to your team. So I've been trying to do that. I've been trying to do 2 a day every day since we spoke, and been very, very positive. Good advice.
I'm so pleased. And, you know, to do that by phone call just gives people the freedom that they, like I said, that they're not chained to their laptops. And, you know, you kind of get to know people when it's a little less formal. You're never really going to really get to know people and understand their personal circumstances. And look, some people are going to be, you've got a difference between introverts and extroverts here. Some people are going to be more guarded. Others will want to share their circumstances. You don't know. Maybe, you know, they could be living with family who are emergency service workers, healthcare workers. You know, have they got dependents? Are they caring for older relatives? Do they feel isolated? Are they in a shared house where actually it's not that easy to, you know, they may not have a desk set up even. So everyone's circumstances are different. And actually, part of being empathetic is understanding that and making allowances and reasonable adjustments of the way that you work. So, you know, for example, not, you know, giving people the option whether or not they turn their cameras on for meetings. That's something that the BBC does really well, and you never feel pressure to be tuned in on your you know, on your camera, because there's just days sometimes where you know it's a camera off day.
That's right.
That's usually a Monday morning for me.
I think every day should be a camera off day for me, but I usually have it off.
So yeah, ask, empathize, listen, be spontaneous with your communication, and have regular check-ins on an individual level, is the second piece of advice. And then finally, and we just touched on it a bit, is, you know, balancing autonomy with flexibility and being supportive. So you know, you want to be checking in with people, but equally you want to be giving them the flexibility to work autonomously. So you've kind of got to get the balance between the two, and that's just about, you know, having an understanding of people's individual circumstances, how they like to work, and reminding them to be to work as flexibly as they can. Obviously, each business will be it will have its own set of challenges, but where possible, you know, allow people to work autonomously. And I think that's easier in cultures where there's already trust.
I think that's a big thing. I mean, we've talked about it a lot on the Leader Series, is that whole trust element. I think that the forward-thinking leaders have really learned a lot about trust in this last 12 months, whereas maybe they wouldn't have the trust before. But now I think people realise that actually it's not so much, are you going to do any work, but actually I need to stop you doing work, and you need to disconnect at certain points so that you can kind of, you know, you can't stop working.
And you know, we're not even going there with the challenges of kind of virtual working, because it's a whole other session by itself, isn't it? And having that end point to your day, you know, especially if you're living in a crowded house where you don't have a study, you don't, you know, your living room is one room, and that's where you're doing your work, that's where you're eating, that's where your family is, etc. You know, it isn't easy, but that's a whole other session. But just to recap on the three pieces of advice, it's reinforcing purpose and mission, ask, don't assume, and balancing autonomy with support, flexibility with support. So and making people.
So the last question we've got is, and I think this is really, really important, as we look forward now, we know there are major changes that have happened in all areas of industry, and they will all have effects on the staff attraction and retention landscape post-COVID, however we come out of this. Hopefully we will come out of this. It'd be nice if we did at some point. What do you think would be the main changes that you can see as an HR expert, that you can see going forward, that we should all be aware of?
I think there's a whole host of positives. So I think, what do I think the future landscape is going to look like? Okay, so I think that the location of the workforce is, I'm going to start with another obvious point, sorry, but the location of the workforce is going to have changed. So we may see more international hiring. We may have people who currently based in the UK who, request to go to another part of the world to actually do their work. People are obviously not going to be commuting in the way that they were, because I think very few people will return to a full-time in the office kind of job. So I think we're going to have a combination of Zoom and room meetings in the future, I think, which could pose some difficulties logistically and technically for some companies who don't have the infrastructure. I think the second thing is that employers will need to look at well-being more holistically and be prepared to put more resources behind offering employee support. So they'll, for those who've already got services and programs in place, we'll see an expansion of that, I think, in the future. I think people will feel more comfortable discussing topics such as mental health, and I think there'll be a focus on people's mental and physical well-being.
Not just only. I think I've always felt in the past it's always been an add-on, like a benefit. Okay, we'll give you gym membership because other companies are doing it. And it's just to kind of keep up with the changes. But now I think, because people aren't having that way of connecting, the team working and the kind of social aspects that work brings, that you need to kind of almost encourage people to get out of their house, to do things, to interact, even to kind of keep themselves fit and healthy, because otherwise you could just sit like you said, in your room, maybe watch Netflix, maybe eat, maybe work, and that's it, isn't it?
You want an engaged and motivated workforce, so that's where it starts. What else? So I think we will see some leaders who won't make it. I think that, it's a real test whether you can lead in a time of crisis. And I think that some leaders will surface to the, will pass that test. I think that others won't. And I think that I think the new generation of leaders will be a much more flexible, empathetic, employee engagement focused kind of leader. Not all leaders are good communicators, but I think this has been a real test of that, hasn't it?
That's right. And being able to work in like collaborative ways rather than just command and control, like do this, because as you said, you need people to be self-motivated and bought into what they're doing, because otherwise they probably won't do it, will they?
And you need leaders to be decisive and concise in their communication. Coming back to the kind of mission and purpose, that starts with good leadership. I think that we will benefit from deeper connections with our colleagues. I think we'll find new levels of connection through our shared experience of the lockdowns. And, we'll have an appreciation of people's life outside of work. And I think that's a real positive.
I think so. I definitely think that, you kind of meet people's children, don't you? Or see their dogs, or, or like you said, talk to them when they're walking around the shops or something. It's not always in the office, you get to know them a bit more. And I think that's really nice, really.
And I think in terms of work processes themselves, I think, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, I think we'll see some reduction in bureaucratic processes. I think that in order to work more seamlessly, companies will need to reduce those kind of roadblocks. And I think that it's been a perfect time to look at that, to look at processes and look at where investments need to be made. Yeah. And then finally, office space. And this is going to be the big shift, isn't it? Because we're going to have renewed appreciation for our offices. They are going to be different for a long time to come. But I would hope that eventually they'll become much more sociable places. Remember what it was like to be sociable at work?
I know, God, yeah.
In person.
I can't remember actually, no.
And, there'll be less requirement for desk space for the most part. So, we'll be able to create more innovative and kind of creative spaces. Yeah. And just talking about, just going back to the work processes and reduction in bureaucracy, I think times of crisis also give way to opportunity. So new ways of working, innovation, we'll see lots of small businesses that have been set up during the last year. As many businesses have failed, but new ones will come along to replace them. So change is kind of is inevitable, and I think there are going to be lots of positives to come out of it.
Well, it's good to hear you giving those positives, Deb. I think it's been great to really listen to someone who's got such experience in working in these areas and has really obviously thought very deeply about what the changes will be, what the challenges will be, but hopefully what the positive outcomes will be for all of us, because we're all here, we're all working together. So Deb, thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to speaking over the next few weeks and months. Thank you very much.